Recently, Black Desert Online has been having a bit of a resurgence. Despite being a 9-year-old game, for some reason people are deciding to play it. I noticed this when I saw it pop up on the Steam top sellers list. Shortly after, I started to see some YouTube videos pop up about it, and it turns out that the game recently released a big expansion called Land of the Morning Light. This expansion seems to address a lot of the complaints that players have about the game, and it also claims to streamline the new player experience. And while all of that sounds great, I still had one key question that nobody seemed to answer. Is Black Desert Online good? And so, like the fool I am, I decided I was going to answer that question for myself. Lucky for me, at some point in time, I already bought the game, so I had it ready and available on Steam and decided to install it. And there's two main questions that I'm looking for answers to. Is the new player experience in Black Desert Online, or BDO as the cool kids call it, good? And secondly, is the game itself any good? However, before starting this experiment, I needed to set some ground rules. First off, I'm going to try and avoid any resources that a casual MMO player wouldn't pick up on. So I'm going to be limiting how much time I dedicate to reading up on the game or tutorials or guides. I will be watching the marketing material in advance and pretending that that's the reason that I got interested in it. I'm going to put a hard limit on the time I spend on the game at 20 hours. I think that 20 hours is more than enough to make a decision on if the new player experience is good or not. Sorry to spoil some stuff, but it's gonna be more than 20 hours. This goes places. Just you wait. With the rules in place, come with me to discover the world of Black Desert Online. I really do have the worst ideas. Unsurprisingly, the first step to my journey was deciding on a character class. As I would come to understand later, character classes in this game have a specialization choice. You can either continue with the base class as it is but make it stronger, or choose an awakening, which changes the weapon that you use. I had no idea about this or about awakening classes when I started playing the game. I just looked at the immense list of classes. I'm not sure that's supposed to look like that, but okay. Did a little bit of YouTubing of different classes as gameplay, and most importantly, tried some out for myself, since you can create training characters which are already level 60 and have access to awakening, something that, again, I didn't even know what it was. It feels so weighty. That's awesome. After testing some different classes, I really wanted to focus on trying to play something that was more unique than things I had played in other MMOs. My recent experience with MMOs has been about 1,200 hours of Final Fantasy XIV, 600 hours of Lost Ark, and about 100 hours of New World. And while not being the most unique, I also decided that it was a good idea to play the Megu, which is one of the two new classes introduced recently into BDO, which is a Fox Spirit caster that, if you've played League of Legends, then it's basically Ari. So I jumped into the character creator. It was way too overwhelming for me. As a quick note to how Korean this game feels, having gender-locked classes right out of the gate gave me PTSD from people complaining about Lost Ark. So in the end, I didn't touch basically anything, and I decided to look for the stupidest name possible for my character, and I ended up with Constant Striking. And her family name, of course, Fam Be Lit. And our 20-hour timer starts now. Immediately, I was thrown into the deep end, out somewhere in the middle of a desert, talking to somebody saying a lot of strange names that are probably important to some lore.
That is the colossal weapon of ancient Kabur, the Ator.
I know what all of these things mean. They gave me some typical spiel about me being the chosen one, and then some very basic, albeit not very good tutorializing. One of the stranger choices included me fighting all of these enemies which were marked as elite but had 1 HP, and then running out to talk to an orb. Once this brief introduction is done, the game gives you a choice. Do you want to start from the origin point of the release of Black Desert Online? Would you like to go to the first expansion, or would you like to go to this most recent expansion? As per the rules of this video, I decided to listen to the marketing materials, specifically this video by IGN, which is presented by Black Desert Online, so an advertisement, where they say that this expansion was designed with the intention that new players could start from it.
Potential new players don't have to play catch-up before starting the Land of the Morning Light expansion. It's designed to be especially welcoming to newcomers,
while showing you that it says recommended for veteran players. Also, while we're at it, 55,000 views and 237 likes, oh boy. I pressed on and ignored the sinking feeling I had that maybe I had been bamboozled by marketing into wasting my time. But we were already here, and we might as well jump into the land of the morning light. The game gives you the option of remembering your past adventures through your companion, the Black Spirit, which is this little black mochi here. I said yes, and it brought me to this image gallery explaining things that I don't think causes a very good first impression for new players. The presentation of this is god-awful. Like, these low-quality still images, and I still get notifications at the top of my screen. Now, I was already feeling a little bit disconnected with the story with the way that it started off. But then after time skipping and now having to put myself in the shoes of somebody that went through all of these adventures and understands things, made it even harder for me to connect. Once that is done, you are forced to interact with different things in your environment and learn how to call upon your Black Spirit companion, which you're going to have to do time and time again to start quest lines. I did find it refreshing that to interact with things I had to constantly press R instead of G. So, you know, at least my hand position was a little different on the keyboard compared to Lost Ark. From here, the general experience will be going into a cutscene and then an extended sequence where you press R to interact with a lot of things into another cutscene. The game quickly introduces you to the auto path feature, which allows you to press T to immediately go to your next assigned objective without you having to touch anything. This feature works sometimes, and other times will get you stuck on the middle of the road, so if you were intending to use it to get up and grab a drink or go to the bathroom, maybe it'll work, who knows. Another thing the game gives you might be related to the seasonal server, which is where I'm playing. And if you're asking yourself, why did you start on a seasonal server? It's because it was at the top of the server list and the only server listed as novice, which I think qualifies as what a normal person would do is go to the novice server and not realize that the seasonal server is the one that gives you very accelerated experience gain. Whether it be the server or the game itself, after completing certain quests you will get a 50% speed boost, so you are zooming across the map all of the time, way faster than you can go with a mount. So just in case I'm not painting a clear picture here, you are going to be spending a long time running from place to place, speaking to people, and sometimes watching a cutscene. That is why I do appreciate that absolutely everything that I encountered was voiced. The quality of that voice work ranged from people putting in their 100% absolute best to some characters kind of phoning it in, some strange choices on accents, like your main companion Dulceway having this southern twang to him.
Okay, we'll be heading back to Darvel. We're exhausted.
And of course, the dialogue itself did range from pretty funny and kind of quirky to just very cringy and not consistent at all.
Plug your ears when you hammer, or you won't be able to hear anything at all, Meow.
But at least the production was there to put in that voice acting for everything if you just wanted to enjoy it. At some point, I did start skipping a grand majority of the dialogue, and I did stop again if I thought that a particular questline was interesting. But it did truly become the Lost Ark experience of just press G a lot, but this time it's R. I really can't stress that enough, that there will be a lot of skipping dialogue if what you're looking for is to get to the gameplay. I also don't know how this would shake out if you're starting a second character that skips to this area. You can't have another seasonal character as far as I know, but you can have another normal character that starts off at the Land of the Morning Light. And you cannot skip the cutscenes. You can, some of them 5 times the speed of them, and others you just can't skip at all. And some of the dumbest things that you can experience in this game are in those unskippable cutscenes. Let me show you a clip of one of them because I just couldn't believe my ears and my eyes, and I couldn't. It generally made me question too many things.
Sick or standing tall and proud, with a bitty bob that makes us shiver, we all bow down and down. But wait, what's that? What's that sound? A slice at hoe stole the bet? I go! Oh my, oh, what do we do? Oh, what do we do? The dog gave me wail, boo-hoo, boo-hoo, and cried a huge hole in the sky.
But anyways, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of what is going to happen during your playthrough of the Land of the Morning Light. You will be playing through a series of questlines that advertise having the innovative system of branching paths. They always have the same exact system. You start a questline somewhere, normally involving your companion Dulceway. You then talk to a lot of people. Somebody sends you out to kill some things to collect stuff. Normally, you have to kill 10 deer or 10 boar or something like that. Once you progress the questline, you will face a boss, sometimes preceded by smaller enemies and sometimes just directly the boss. You will get this boss down to about 20 to 30% of their HP, and a cutscene will interrupt the fight. You will then go back to one of the main quest givers. You will then make a decision on either solving the conflict peacefully or solving it violently. It does not matter which one you choose. You will then refight the boss. The only thing the previous decision affects is if they will be alive after you fight them or not. And during that second refight, which has the same exact cutscene to introduce the boss, by the way, the quest will resolve, and now you can start another questline that will fall into the same exact pattern. I do not know if it's because of the seasonal server. I would like to believe so, but all of these bosses are so incredibly easy that you cannot even see their mechanics, but they do have mechanics. It is a real shame because I kept thinking as I played through these sequences that if these boss encounters were, 5-10 minutes long, you get to see all of the mechanics, you have to form a strategy and get into a rhythm of your ability rotation and how you use everything and actually forced you to use all of your abilities well, it would be really fun, because of course the highlight of Black Desert Online is its combat. But at least in my playthrough, until you reach the very end of it, you won't really get any satisfying combat experiences. But before we continue, I think it's fair that I give a more overall review of this experience. Starting out at the expansion and leveling from there was an absolute slog. There was really nothing fun about it, there was nothing entertaining to it. It felt like a waste of time. Every single one of the quests feels like a stereotypical fetch quest, the one that you see people criticize as an easy joke with MMO quest design. I think that my biggest complaint about it is that for something that marketing materials themselves tout as a good way to start the game, you don't interact with any of the systems in the game at all. You don't farm, you don't gear, you don't do anything related to life skills. There's nothing else to ever get stuck on and say, oh, I want to farm this, I want to get this gear, I think this would be fun to do. There's no dungeons, there's no reason to group with anybody ever. And whenever there is gameplay, it is just so incredibly easy that there is no reason to have your brain on. The only things that can save this experience is if you were invested in the story. It is true that at least that has production value, you have the voice acting, some of the cutscenes can be very funny, I guess, if you want to count that as a positive, but everything else feels like you're being railroaded down into reaching level 56, but once you get there, you know absolutely nothing about the game. And the UI, which has disappeared from this video, since after a while I went back to borderless full screen, so all of my UI went to the sides of the ultra-wide display I use, is a constant reminder that this game has 17 million mechanics more that you are not exploring and you do not understand. Thankfully, once you do finish the main story, you are sent back to the mainland. Once you reach the port of Altanova, the game will guide you towards your Succession and Awakening quest lines. The moment that you start doing normal quests in the mainland, specifically the quests that the game wants you to do, which are higher level 56 quests, you will notice that you do 0 damage to everything. You cannot play the game. And that is where you're forced to gear up. Of course, to do this I had to Google, and by Googling BDO gearing, I got a lot of outdated guides and then a little bit more of an updated one. The game gives you all of the materials to gear up that level 56 equipment. It gives you beginner blackstones, which are a currency you can use to enhance things much like you can in a game like Lost Ark. You do this through the Black Spirit, so you can do it anywhere. You open it up and then you click enhance, you consume the currency, and sometimes you get a successful enhancement and sometimes you don't. What you will realize relatively quickly is that at a certain point, failing an enhancement also brings the level of that item down. and that will cost you the total durability of the weapon. So you need a continuous string of luck, but you can also have a continuous streak of ranking it down, and all the while that's still costing you materials or money. And I even encountered using those beginner blackstones that I couldn't max out some of my items because I just kept ranking them down. I kept going from 4 to 1 when I needed to reach 5. If I were doing this with materials that took me months to farm, and that there is potential monetization behind it, man, I really wouldn't put that much effort into a game with this sort of mechanics. I would much rather prefer that you start at an incredibly low percentage and every time you fail, you get a little bump for the next try. That at least feels like you have a guarantee. There's always going to be a way, even if it takes years, that you reach that level. But with a system like this that is essentially gambling, it feels like I could be stuck in a loop forever. But for now, it doesn't affect me. So I kept playing towards my awakening quest. Now, at this point, the quests that I was being sent on were actually fun. They did require a lot of running around for an extended amount of time, but once you get there, it was basically kill 30 things, and the combat was actually fun and required me to think about my gear and my cooldowns and have potions because the enemies were actually dangerous. I also had to think about kiting because this specific class, the Megu, is very good at AoE, so I wanted to group up the enemies to take them all down at once. It was overall enjoyable. After you finish this quest line with some boss fights that are, again, actually fun, you get your awakening. In the case of the Megu, that is that you get access to a fan, and now you have some close quarters, more focused attacks to deal damage, and you can take out your awakening weapon by pressing the C key, so you have access to multiple of your skills, your normal skills and also your awakening skills at the same time. This is all real fun. I liked it, but it took me like 8 hours to get here and a lot of confusion. And all I felt was that the learning curve of what was expected of me from here on out, with all of the other mechanics that I would have to learn and how I would start questing and daily quests and weekly quests and how to get all of my materials to start progressing into this endgame, was not something I wanted to do. It all felt intimidating because I just didn't know enough about the game at this point, and the whole world was open to me while I was already at my awakening. It's a very strange feeling of just not wanting to play the game anymore. Even when it finally became fun, I just didn't want to keep playing. Now, despite the many flaws that I had encountered up to this point in Black Desert, I didn't just want to say, well, this is it, I didn't like it that much, goodbye, because I really did suspect that the game itself and the combat in it is so good that the core mechanics must be enough to keep a lot of people engaged and playing in this game. And all of the classes seem so unique and fun to play that I can understand why people would continue to roll alts and just keep playing this game over and over. But my initial experience was so terrible that maybe that was coloring my opinion. So, because as I said before, I only have terrible ideas, I decided to start again, but on a non-seasonal server from the very start of the game instead of the expansion. I rolled a new character. I chose a Nova, which is what you saw at the very beginning of this video, that uses the mace and shield, and whose awakening allows her to transition to a very fast-paced rapier character. I appropriately named her I Don't Block, and set on my second leg of this journey to see where was the crucial mistake in the new player experience within Black Desert Online. Before we do that though, I would like to remind you that if you're enjoying this video, hitting the like button is greatly appreciated, and if you want to see more things like this in the future, the best way to do it is to subscribe. On with the video. I was very surprised to find out that the general experience right from the beginning was much better going from the very start of the game than starting at the expansion. I'm talking night and day. Now, it wasn't perfect. The production values were a little lower, some of the quest design was equally archaic, but it was a much more fun experience, and it also pushed me to learn a lot of other things that were much better paced in this version of the game than starting at the expansion. I was very afraid that it was going to be absolutely terrible, considering that many of the quests at the expansion were all centered around defeating very low numbers of very basic mobs, and even just slaughtering wildlife, you know, the typical 10 deer or 10 boar, that this would just be that, but for 20 hours. But right from the start, the game really pushes you into a very different loop where you are accepting quests and then they will send you to kill 25 of a thing, or 50 of a thing, or even 100 of a thing. And those grinding sessions really teach you what this game is about. It's about learning your character, learning all of your cooldowns and how they interact, and fighting a bunch of things efficiently. One of the very important distinctions there is that during the expansion, everything was so incredibly easy that you didn't have time to learn your cooldowns or your combos or anything, and you didn't even need them. If you can eliminate everything with simply one cooldown, there's no need to learn a combo. You just spam a cooldown at random and everything dies. During this, I actually had that opportunity to explore all of my abilities and find out how they worked. I also appreciated that during the main quest line, you had multiple crossroads option, and there was a quite critical one that led you down a very big quest path where you could choose between 3, and the one in the middle was this path focuses on combat. All of the quests down this path will lead you to kill a bunch of stuff, and another one was more story focused, and another one was kind of more of a strange third option. And I chose the combat one, and that's what I got, and I was very happy. I came to a conclusion that summarizes a lot of my opinions on Black Desert Online, which is this game is Dynasty Warriors if it had more in-depth mechanics and was closer to Devil May Cry than the systems that you find in a Dynasty Warriors type of game. And I absolutely love that. I've always wanted a video game that was basically Dynasty Warriors, but with the complexity of a Devil May Cry. It's just that everything that surrounds the game, even after going through this alternative process, does not sell me on it. But before I get too ahead of myself, let's go through the normal leveling process in the game. You will be doing a lot of running around and pressing R, just the same as before. The scenery, the characters, the places, and especially the pace at which you're leveling up and how much you have to go and fight enemies really eases you into the game much better than the expansion did. I was genuinely having fun. It took me around 3 to 4 days, playing between 3 and 5 hours to reach level 56 and get my awakening on my new character. But I genuinely wanted to log on and play every day. It still suffers from some of those same problems where a lot of the time you're just pressing T and then you're just autopathing and then I'm watching something else on YouTube. But the percentage of time that I was playing the game and engaged while doing so was just, I don't know, 10 times more, and pressing buttons in this game feels incredible. So getting to experience that combat and to feel the difference as all of your skills increase and you get more skills and add them to your rotation, or how those skills start changing and adding more hits to the chain or have different effects or their AoE gets larger, all of these things are very engaging and keeps you hooked on wanting to keep leveling up and reaching the next milestone. Specifically because it is that impactful. Instead of just being numbers, you're actually seeing differences. Your attack speed is going up. You're learning to animation cancel certain things. You're learning how different combos flow together for different situations. It's really good. During this process, I kept thinking I wanted to start another character from the other expansion just to test it out, because all of the characters look so fun that I would like to explore their combos and see their playstyle. Unfortunately, everything that surrounds the combat is just not up to par. I didn't mention this before, but in the Land of the Morning Light expansion, I had 6 soft locks, where coming out of a cutscene, I could not interact with anything, I could not open the menu, I just had to Alt F4, force close the game, and then reopen it and things were fine. I didn't experience that here, but I did experience a lot of buggy quests that wouldn't update or that would autopath me to a different thing. I would find quest objectives that were not really well functioning. During my awakening quest, I failed a boss fight because I ran out of potions, and the process to retry that quest was very confusing and apparently soft-locked a lot of people 2 years ago when it was first implemented. There's just a lot of jank, a lot of general jank in the game that doesn't feel as polished as the combat. Running from place to place in this world, and every time I got to smash things with my mace, I was happy. But when you have to stop and talk to people and then start thinking about all of the additional mechanics and life skilling and training horses and 17 other million things, it just got overwhelming because I don't feel very driven to spend so much time to grind so many resources to use them on a gambling system when I'm not really going to be pushing further into newer skills or anything. I'm just going to be increasing my level score. Now, that is something that can be easily solved. Lost Ark solves it very well by just giving you very, very cool boss fights. And you are pushing through because your access to those boss fights that are so cool is gated by your gear progression. In other games like Final Fantasy XIV, the reason that you keep pushing through and doing all of the quests, and well, in that game it's because the story is really, really good. But additionally, all of the endgame content, including all of your raids and your boss fights, they're all incredibly fun. And they force you to form parties and join a guild and farm for cosmetics and just things that are fun to do that you have to continue gearing and you have to continue playing the game to access that content, and it's challenging and satisfying to complete. If Black Desert Online has content like that, and during both of my entire playthroughs of the new player experience up to my awakening, they never guided me or showed me that these types of things exist and that later on I will be able to play super cool boss fights or dungeons, or what the rewards will be for doing these cool events that they never showed me, then their new player experience is absolute garbage. So I'd rather think that they just don't exist. And from what I understand by researching the game, they don't. For many, many years, the only reason to continue grinding up at Endgame was to gear up in order to do PvP, and I'm not the type of person that enjoys PvP. From what I see, they have started implementing new things with this expansion to introduce newer PvE mechanics that are an incentive to keep grinding at endgame. But if they're just being implemented now, I doubt that they are as robust as any other game. So the lack of content and the lack of quality in that content needs to be compensated for you as a player if you choose to play this game instead of a different one, exclusively by that combat system, and hopefully by the design of those encounters in the endgame. But again, I'm not an expert, I didn't get there, and the things that I saw through research were quite inconclusive and with a lot of mixed opinions, and no matter how you slice it, seems to be very bare bones and a work in progress. Reaching level 56 required me to grind the last 2 levels because the other alternative was to continue the questline in either one of the 2 expansions or the Valencia questline, which, from what I understand, is quite terrible. So instead of boarding a ship and waiting an hour, which I think is what you're supposed to do, to get to newer locations, I decided to stay on the mainland where I was and just farm up, and that experience was fun but tiring. However, if you are a person that really enjoys putting on a podcast and perfecting a loop and just grinding really hard, this is probably some of the best grinding I've seen in MMOs. And that grinding is fun because the combat is fun, and that's the core of the game. Because this is undoubtedly the best combat system I've played in an MMO. So I don't want to be too hard on the game, because if you're a person that's looking for a really good combat system and basically nothing else, I think you could find a lot of joy here. Just combat and then some side maintenance. There are other problems with this game, but I'm not that qualified to speak about them, namely the monetization, because I didn't put a penny in, but the game does have quite a number of pop-ups recommending you to buy the in-game currency, which is already a red flag that you trade money for in-game currency. And there are a lot of pay-to-win or pay-to-convenience, however you want to call it, items available that will speed up your leveling process. And if that is a red flag for you, then, you know, stray away from this one. This one is probably not for you. Maybe go with a different MMO with a subscription service or that doesn't implement monetization in the same way. It does have all of the MMO mechanics that you might expect. It has a trading market, it has that PvP, it has life skilling, but everything here that shines is about killing things. If you like that, if you like the flashy combat, if you check out all of the classes and you're like, oh, that looks amazing, give it a try. You never know if it's going to be for you, but this is not for me. I had a blast playing my Nova and grinding stuff, and I got what I wanted out of that. I would love for this to all be surrounded by a different system. Since it's not there, I don't know, maybe I'll come back to the game at some point and give it a shot, but I don't think that's going to be for now. But I did really enjoy jumping into a completely new game and trying to give a good evaluation of how the new player experience feels and if it's good at hooking you and how far it takes you. So I think I'm going to be making more videos in this style they require quite a lot of time. I ended up putting around 37 hours of playtime to make this video, and all of that was recorded. Editing it while having a full-time job is really hard, but I really like doing it, so I'm going to do it again. I don't know with what game, because I know MapleStory is a game I played when I was very young, and that is very different now, and I know Guild Wars is coming out with a new expansion, but if you have any recommendation for me, maybe even World of Warcraft, go ahead and leave it down in the comments. And if you want to see another video like this in the future, make sure to subscribe. I do a lot of videos, so if you enjoyed this one, you might like some of my other ones as well. In any case, to answer my questions from the very beginning, the new player experience can be very, very bad when starting at the expansion, and decent and fun. It doesn't prepare you very well for the rest of the game, but it is very fun if you start from the very beginning. And is the game good? It's got a fantastic combat system. That's as far as I'm willing to go. I've been Mug Thief, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the internet.